According to news reports, Democrats are planning to hold seminars for Democrat candidates on how to talk to real Americans. I'm not making that up. These seminars will attempt to teach Democrats to stop speaking Democrat and start speaking real American, in the hopes that they will make Democrat policies sound as if they were real American policies and thus cause real Americans to mistake Democrats for real Americans and vote for them. As Democrat seminar leader Shea Ivanovich Muhammad told reporters, quote, "If we can't convince real Americans to vote for us, then we won't be able to fundamentally transform America into something else. And that's un-American. Or maybe it's American. Sometimes I get those two confused," unquote. The Daily Wire has managed to obtain or invent a prospective syllabus for the Democrat seminars, listing the topics with a brief description of each class. Among the topics to be discussed will be guns, what are they, and how can we ban them? The syllabus says, quote, "Many Americans have come to feel that the Constitution's Second Amendment protection of the right to bear arms should be interpreted as a protection of their right to bear arms. When talking to real Americans, Democrats should carefully explain how dangerous guns are by showing how every time they are in the hands of Islamic terrorists, they go off and kill someone. If the real Americans tell Democrats that we should ban Islamic terrorists instead of banning guns, Democrats should explain to the real Americans that they are making the Statue of Liberty cry, because that's not who we are. Hopefully, this will convince the real Americans to be who we are, instead of being real Americans," unquote. Another seminar listed on the Democrat syllabus is the Constitution. Is it a living document? And if so, how can we kill it? The syllabus says, quote, "Many real Americans feel a great affection for the Constitution as a document that ensures their freedoms. Democrats should carefully explain to real Americans that the Constitution was written so long ago that the paper has become all brown and crinkly and no one can read what it says. If real Americans continue to insist on following the Constitution, Democrats should explain that it was written by white men who owned slaves and wore wigs, sometimes at the same time. And it would clearly be much more fun to get our laws from screaming women who dress up as vaginas," unquote. Other seminars on how Democrats can talk to real Americans include how to drop your G's and call people folks as if you were some idiot from the Midwest, how to break it to people of faith that there is no God, and how to convince a patriot his country really stinks. Seminars will be open to anyone who can present evidence that he's a Democrat and not a real American. But I repeat myself. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show.
I feel hunky-dunky, life is tickety-boo. Birds are winging, also singing hunky-dunky-doo. Ship-shaped, tipsy-topsy, the world is zippity-zing. It's a wonderful day, hurrah, hooray! It makes me want to sing. Oh, hurrah, hooray! Oh, hooray, hurrah!
All right, I am back from our nation's capital where I was swanning around with the president and the vice president, and the King of Jordan was there as well, and me, who is the king of my own imagination. A lot of royalty was in the room. I'm incredibly jet lagged. I have to tell you this. If I lose some words along the way, that's why. I came back fairly late last night, and I thought to myself, I really want to go up and watch the Fox panel. So I just know what they're talking about before I come in, but I hate to fall asleep in front of the television set. But I thought I'll just go up and try and watch it. So I sit down, I instantly fall asleep, and I wake up, and there's a gigantic Ben Shapiro face in front of me. I guess he was on Fox last night, and I have this huge TV, and it was like, oh my God! I thought it was a nightmare, but I was actually awake. But I'm going to talk about my experience at the National Prayer Breakfast, which was quite an experience. Really got some fresh insights into a lot of stuff. But I'm going to talk about that in a little while. So if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you will have to come over to thedailywire.com where you can listen to it, or if you just spend a lousy $8 a month, you can subscribe, watch the whole show at the Daily Wire. You don't have to bounce around. First, I want to talk about something else that's going on, and it was going on while I was gone, and it's still going on, which is this upheaval on the left, on the streets, which is, of course, funded and paid for by guys like George Soros. These are, as Donald Trump tweeted this morning, these are professional anarchists and paid protesters, but they are tapping into something that has already been going on at universities where, of course, we know from watching Ben try and go and speak at universities that they already have shut down the American commitment to free speech. And, you know, the idea, this is kind of a three-tier attack. What's happening, it happens on the streets, it happens in the press, it happens in the political arena, and it's kind of interesting to watch the way these guys are flowing together, you know, and it is, you know, people are it's, you know, conservatives are people who can follow any change to disaster in their imaginations. That's who conservatives are. Conservatives are people who see a change and think that's the end of the world. Now it's over. Oh my God, something's different. Everything's good. That's why they're conservatives. That's their natural instinct. So I know people who are looking at this, staunch conservatives, and saying, oh, that, you know, these guys, they can't win by voting, so they're going to win by just destroying the country. It's going to be a revolution, and this is, you know, this terrible thing. And even a guy like Michael Savage, who is really out there on the right, is suddenly urging Trump to not move so fast and not do so many controversial things, which that just strikes me as backing off. You know, I mean, it reminds me of an old Jules Pfeiffer cartoon about feminists. This is way back in the 70s or something. It was in the Village Voice, and he had a cartoon of a woman screaming, I want, and then suddenly everything was dumped on her, and she said, I don't want it, you know. And that's what that reminds me of. These conservatives have been screaming, we've got to change things, and now Trump has come along and he's changing things very quickly, and suddenly they're going, stop, you know. And so anyway, this obviously happened in Berkeley, but it also happened outside NYU, where Gavin McInnes tried to speak. I think this is last night. And you know Gavin McInnes, he's basically a comedian, a performance artist. He's really funny. He does a lot of anti-feminist stuff. And they had to turn out to stop this. And an NYU professor, because the thing about Berkeley, they kept saying these are outside agitators, and I'm sure that's largely true. I'm sure there's a lot of that going on. But this is an NYU college professor. I don't have her name. But she does look like that Melissa, was it Click, who was, yeah. But anyway, she is screaming at the police, telling them to beat up the people coming to see Gavin McInnes. This is her idea of fighting fascism, is telling the police to beat up people she disagrees with. Listen to this.
Why are you here? You're not here to protect these students from Nazis. No, you're not. This is completely f***ed up. And these students had to face them on their own. You should be ashamed of yourself! You should be standing up to those Nazis! You should be protecting these students from hate! This is hate! These are assholes! And this is a joke! You're protecting the Nazis! It's a joke! You are a joke! You're grown boys! You're grown boys! And even the black ones! You're grown boys too, you mother. You're not protecting the NYU students here, and I'm disgusted! I'm a professor! How dare you! How dare you, assholes, protect neo-Nazis! You!
I'm a professor! I mean, come on. So this is where these people are. This is their mindset, that this is fighting fascism, is to have the police beat up people you disagree with, which, of course, is fascism. I mean, Gavin McInnes, he's just there to entertain. And the reason they're so upset at Gavin and Milo is because Gavin and Milo are them. Gavin and Milo are both kind of left-wing people who feel the culture, who understand how to troll people, who understand how to do this, and that's why they hate him. And here's CNN reporting, and listen carefully to the way they report the protest. Now, these protests in the street, people dressed in black with masks on are beating up Trump supporters with one maced a Trump supporter. Others are carrying rods and beating people with them. Okay, that's what's happening in the streets of Berkeley, California, where the free speech movement was born. Ha ha ha. Now, okay, and this is CNN reporting. So the police didn't really do very much to stop this going on. They didn't, they let this go on. Same thing happened at Gavin McInnes' speech. He was maced as he was walking up on stage, and ultimately the crowd got so rowdy he had to stop. And, CNN at one point referred to Milo as, I think the phrase they used was, he was an extreme right-wing conservative. I think, like Bernie Sanders is an extreme left-wing liberal, I mean, it's like he was an extreme right-wing conservative, extremist conservative right-winger, it's like they're justifying. Here's New York Times reporter Malini Rameir. She works for the New York Times, which used to be a newspaper. You may remember it, some of you. It's called How Violence Undermined the Berkeley Protests. So it's like violence is some guy, some guy named Violence showed up. It's like that commercial where the girl has diarrhea and her diarrhea is played by another woman, It's like Violence showed up and disrupted the protests, So here she says, I saw someone wearing all black walk up to a student wearing a suit and say, you look like a Nazi. The student was confused, but before he could reply, the black-clad person pepper sprayed him and hit him on the back with a rod. This is taking place in America, by the way, just so we're clear about this. The reporter says, I ran after the student who was attacked to get his name and more information. He told me that he is a Syrian Muslim. Before I could find out more, he fled, fearing another attack. Amid the chaos came word the event had been canceled. It was clear early on that the majority of violent protesters most likely were not from the campus. Still, in the aftermath, I heard people say that peaceful demonstrations would not have succeeded in preventing Mr. Yiannopoulos from speaking. So was violence appropriate, she asks? A Trump supporter was hurt. A Syrian Muslim student was hurt. Does either of those statements seem more outrageous than the other? I mean, this is, was violence appropriate to stop Milo Yiannopoulos from speaking? So here is Milo speaking out. I want to get cut number 3 here.
But it turns out that the progressive left, the social justice left, the feminist Black Lives Matter, Antifa left, the hard left, which has become so utterly antithetical to free speech in the last few years, is taking a turn post-Trump's election where they simply will not allow any speaker on campus, even somebody as silly and harmless and gay as me, to have their voice heard. They won't allow students to listen to differing points of view. They're absolutely petrified by alternative visions of how the world ought to look, and people with arguments and fact and reason that don't conform to the crazy social justice left vision of the universe. So I was evacuated by my security detail and by the police tonight from UC Berkeley. UC Berkeley, of course, being the home of the free speech movement. It's both ironic and sad that this campus appears to be no friend to free speech anymore.
And this, I've talked about Milo before. I actually admire his talent a lot, and I respect his intelligence, and I respect what he's trying to do. He's trying to take the fact that he's gay, and he had the dangerous faggot tour and all this stuff. He really knows exactly where to get him. He's an icon of what the left thinks the left should look like, and he's a Trump supporting right winger. And I have talked about the fact that I think sometimes he has justified evil in justifying kind of that section of the alt-right, which has now become a meaningless phrase, meaning anybody the media dislikes. But he has occasionally justified, the white supremacists as being kind of trolls, as being ironic. The anti-Semitism is just ironic. They're just trying to say things. But, there is this place where you cross over from irony into evil, and evil will always trump irony. That's the thing. You can always be sort of saying, oh, yes, I was just being ironic when I beat that man to death. It was just a comment on our times. It was kind of performance art, However, I think one of the things that you will notice, by the way, with the Trump administration is now they're in power, all that alt-right stuff has gone away. And Milo was on Breitbart writing that he was against white supremacy, that was not the way to go. That's not what he was looking for. And I think, I think that once they rode into power, they understood everyone around Trump, not everyone around Trump, but so many people in his family are married to Jews or sleeping with Jews or have converted to Judaism. This is not an anti-Semitic administration. It's not a racist administration, I don't think, at all. But that, of course, is always the left's go-to phrase. So they find the people in the crowd who are racist, and it is possible, and I think it is true, that Milo may have gone down that road a little bit, and I think he's realized that now. However, he still has a right to speak and do his routine, and basically his routine is against political correctness. We have to say goodbye to Facebook and YouTube. Come over to thedailywire.com, and I'll be talking about my experience at the National Prayer Breakfast, watching President the Donald, and the Vice President.